experience, there's certainly still a lot that needs to be done.
Do you want to go first?
So, in my experience, have the social and the medical model converged?
Have they come close together? Are they likely to ever be able to come close together? I'm thinking specifically with regards to the treatment you've received from health professionals. Have you seen new trainings or new medics come through with a slightly better understanding of your experience?
Tony, can I say something?
Yeah.
Well, you can ask Sophie if you can say something.
Sophie.
Go ahead, because
Do you want me to help you out?
Yeah, that would
Right.
be very good.
And I might stick my oar in as well.
You will, I know you will. Right.
Because the medical model and the social model can never converge.
That's what I was
They're,
thinking.
they're totally polarised positions.
I think from what I understand, is that I still think there's a lot of professional resistance to listening to disabled people and believing disabled people and taking on the perspective. And you know what's interesting is the perspective of the social model has been, it's not a single thing, it's been around for over 30 years and hundreds and thousands of people have contributed to, because it's a model, that's what it is. I mean, it's not a single entity or a single body of theory, it is a number of different, but it's what, for me, it's where we have a starting point for that dialogue about, or the discourse where you can discuss disability in a different way. And I think what's problematic is that, I agree with Tony, you can't converge a social and medical model, but what we should be saying is that we want health professionals to be much more engaged with the discourse from our side, because that simply doesn't happen sufficiently, and I think there is active resistance to it in an awful lot of cases. Certainly in the work I've been doing recently in mental health, it's very hard to get through that, you know, there isn't, and I think one of the things that happens, and the story that Tony told really was very indicative of that. I think one of the things that's really hard to do is to sort of express that people still must maintain dignity, and I know this is an ongoing theme within health, but you know, for many people, the minute they go over into that world that is the sort of, you know, the medical world, they stop becoming a person, they become their impairment, and their dignity is just stripped away. And that's hugely, hugely problematic, you know, which is why I think we need to be very vocal about putting forward our alternative and maintaining that dialogue must take place.
The second part of your question was aimed at Bridget,
Yeah.
and it was, if I can sort of paraphrase what you're saying, has this exhibition had any impact on the medical profession?
We have had, from the kind of evaluation that we've done, we have had some people who have identified as being from the medical profession within the kind of comments that they've left. And generally, I'd say, you know, it's only a handful of people. It's quite difficult because we didn't ask people to say, you know, are you a doctor or not? But the ones that chose to say they were from the medical profession, I'd say on the whole there was a very positive response, and people saying that they had ideas challenged and things. We interviewed 2 disabled doctors. Their panels are at the back, and Vishal Sharma at the back and Thomas Wells on the right, as part of the project. And I have to say that was quite interesting in itself, because they were incredibly hard to track down. And I think there's a couple of things going on there, that there's probably not actually many disabled doctors out there, and from what I was told, if some people that are disabled within the profession, there is, because of the stigma, which is ridiculous within you know, the medical world, they actually might not want to be identified as disabled. But Thomas Wells teaches on a course, I can't actually remember which school he teaches for, but he teaches young medics about you know, how to relate to patients about issues of dignity and self-respect. So I think things are, from what I've kind of picked up from speaking to both of those doctors, things are changing for the better. But I recognise that that's probably possibly a slow journey, and that not everyone embraces it. But I think now for new medics there is more training given and support given on that element than there used to be.
I think what I'd say, you can contradict me because my memory gets a bit hazy, but we tracked down 27 disabled creatives from the present cultural sector really quickly, and we took a heck of a long time to try and find any disabled doctors. The two that Bridget have mentioned, I think one was not trained in this country, and the second one had his impairment whilst as a medical student, so he's already on the road to becoming a doctor and continue to practice. That's, you can make your own connections from that. There's a question at the back.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's really a question, but it's about sort of like with modern diagnosis, and especially in mental health with all the brain scanning stuff that they've now got, and the way they're going to come out with a schizophrenic brain, and kind of is in terms of terminology and how something like this exhibition might actually stop us going back to things like an abnormal brain, because I think there's a real danger that those things can actually come back into play.
Yeah.
And kind of where something like this might take that, really. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does indeed. I mean, when you were speaking, it reminded me of a piece of art in the Science Museum by an artist called Yinka Shonabara, and it's about Yinka asked pregnant women if he could use their scans, fetal scans, and I can't remember. There's 3 words. It's not normal, abnormal. Ben might remember the words. Can you remember what they are?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know you looked at your shoes and I thought, he doesn't want me to ask him. He's looking at his shoes, that's why I'll ask him. But there's 3, look it up because it's a great piece of artwork. But it does make fantastic reference to, is this fetus normal? And if it's not, do we abort it? And if we do abort it, do we lose people like Yinka Shonabara, who is a unique artist of amazing talent? You made a statement, I think, so I don't know whether anybody wants to say anything.
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to my concern as well. It was a real joy for me to see those portraits of people that did look dissimilar from myself in those days, because I just didn't think that people survived, or else if they did survive, that they were killed. But then going back to the previous question about where the exhibition goes, because it's like, I wonder whether, in 50 years' time, all that will be left of me is, the picture from this exhibition, because there won't be other people like with a similar physicality to myself around.
Because they would be
because of all the screaming or whatever.
away. Yeah. It's a powerful argument, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah. There's a question here,
Yeah.
and then there's a question here, and then a question over here.
Basically, it was a comment really about the exhibition. As I was going around it, and this is twice I've been to the exhibition, I noticed that it challenged my perceptions of me being a disabled person. Very, very much so, because I haven't got a physical disability, but inside I have. I've got a hidden disability. And as I was going around, it shocked me that there were people in that Victorian age who were disabled, but they were showing themselves to be disabled. So the historical figures were saying, here's me, this is what I can do, and I can do that. I've used my legs or my arms or you know, a stump or whatever. And as somebody who's always had family say don't play on your disability, it changed that in a way that it sort of eye-opening in a way. And even the focal group, the participants, they jumped out and said that, you know, by seeing what they had said about disability and brought it out to me that, you know, I am a disabled person, you know, so don't listen to anyone that says don't play on your disability, don't do this, don't say that, or don't say, you know, or don't be anyone else that's got a disability, because I have one and I'm not going to listen to it.
So you embrace your identity.
Yeah.
And it's a positive thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, I'd say here to that. I'm sure nobody disabled people in the audience would, and certainly people in that focus group would say that. Question here. Yeah, you, sorry.
I just wanted to say thank you to the panel. I've got a lot from what you've been talking about, especially listening to John talking about the history. And it just made me think about how a lot of the shared language or the shared imagery is really relevant today. And for example, I mean, I tick loads of boxes, you know. And what I'm interested in, for example, with gay pride, we're dropping the pride bit in terms of that there's kind of breakaway groups in terms of people not wanting to celebrate gay pride, but you know, wanting to not have the words and people wanting to use the language. It's really interesting, and I suppose my comment is I feel like this exhibition in particular could be really beneficial to so-called minority groups, community groups, in order to kind of galvanise some kinds of discussion. Like it'd be interesting to hear what, I don't know, the Women's Library has to say about this, or sort of the Black History libraries and things like that, to kind of broaden it out, because I feel like there's a lot of energy within the disability movement that I think one of the ways forwards is to have a bigger conversation across the board, across all the different kind of groups and kind of minorities.
I can only say that I agree 100%. You know, I think a kind of coalitional politics, or you know, respecting the different forms of distinction, difference making, while simultaneously understanding where we have common cause. You know, I'm speaking especially of political cause. I think it's invaluable. I think, you know, these are always going to be imperfect analogies, but we do find tools across these movements, as we've seen. You know, we find slogans that empower us, we shall overcome. You know, we find ways of organizing that have benefited one group and then move on to benefit others. And indeed, what we've learned is that individuals move across these groups. So lesbian women feel marginalized from gay organizing that is often very male-dominated. They move to feminist organizing, but they find that, you know, say the National Organization for Women, or, you know, will speak about something called a lavender menace, and then they move on to civil rights activism and so on. Women of color have, you know, any number of groups with which they might feel they can become empowered, or they feel less so. I absolutely agree. It's in the best interest of all.
Yeah, I wonder if the Equalities Act will, I always think very negatively about the Equalities Act, because I think disability gets subsumed by the louder voices, but whether there is, you know, the potential for other minority groups to see an exhibition like this and see that commonality and maybe support disabled people, you know, in their oppressions. So that's because I'm an optimist. I also think, because we've got a Tory government, then the activism that I took part in as a young person will need to reassert itself. And if it doesn't, then, you know, well, I don't know. If it doesn't, then I'll be sad, because young people need to to embrace a collective identity as well, and become more active against the sort of messages that we're hearing from a government that thinks disabled people are scroungers, because we don't find jobs very easily because we are discriminated against by potential employers. Anyway, I should shut up because there was another question somewhere and I've lost where it was. Yes, there's two actually. You and me, please.
No, you go first.
Yeah.
Mine's a further on this, ladies. It's just the idea that have you found any of things international in different countries of the kind of colleges or positions? Have you got any connections internationally, or do you want to take the exhibition? How do you? I mean, I'd love to see it kind of like reaching out to different countries and, like you said, yeah, scope for a larger thing. It's not just different communities within the UK.
I mean, we have a Royal College of Physicians in Ireland and Scotland, and actually I have had a dialogue with the one in Ireland about whether it could go on tour to them. And yeah, I'm very open to it going as far afield as possible. Again, I have had some contact with a group in the US who are interested in it. I mean, the issue which it comes down to is money, unfortunately, because it's up to the borrowing institute to be able to pay for the transportation of the, it's the kind of the practicalities of getting it to another venue. But I'm certainly open. What I do want to do now is kind of publicise it more widely as a touring exhibition, and see and approach people kind of proactively about it. So
I'd be really interested in finding out, like if you found in different countries what their documentation, historical documentations were as well, and whether they had any other portraits and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean the US obviously does a lot of work around disability studies. I have to say that I don't have a wide knowledge beyond outside of this country. I don't know if you do, John, have a kind of wider scope. But yes, it would be very interesting to see how it fits into a more global kind of look at disability history. But
I just remembered right now, I work in Uganda, and one of the things I did just before I left was a fashion shoot, and that was with an albino, completely and that's never kind of been done before in Uganda. So it was like really interesting to know that, like what was going to happen when it was be published. The images are on Facebook now and everything like that. And there's no comments or anything yet. So I don't know, like it's been like, that's why I'm just really interested in that, in the international scope for this.
There's a whole football team called Albino United in, I can't remember where in Africa, but it is an African team.
There's another question here.
Yeah, I just wanted to share feedback from Liberty Festival briefly. I work for Greenwich and Docklands Festivals, and 4 weeks ago we produced Liberty, London's Disability Arts Festival, on behalf of the Mayor of London. And there were two great feedback across the board from the audience that we had on the festival. One was, it's now a disability arts festival, whereas it started off as a disability rights festival, and disabled audiences said we need to focus more on the disability rights, and I think this is great to hear back, and it was we had many voices that say we need to bring the disability rights element back into the festival. And the second was that really stood out, that Liberty happened for the 9th time this year, and it used to happen on Trafalgar Square all those previous years, and it had to be moved for the first time because of the Olympic Games next year and Trafalgar Square being a test site, etc. So we had to move it over to the South Bank Centre and the National Theatre, and the way audiences embraced the new site and said actually what is very positive about the new site, that disability arts get a more mainstream exposure, because on Trafalgar Square it was quite a contained area, and whereas at the South Bank Centre and the National Theatre you'd have this really great footfall of people that come to the venue to see art, rather than saying they come to see art by disabled artists, but that the artists that we work with really enjoyed it, to have that opportunity to display in an arts venue where they will be recognised for the sake of making art. So just wanted to share those, because I think it's a really great movement, and great to hear those voices.
I
Thank
have
you.
two views on that.
Yeah.
One view is I went to the Liberty Festival myself. I got totally and utterly disorientated where everything was, because you had everything in different spaces, and a few times I kept getting lost, and I couldn't go and watch everything happening, and I was a bit concerned that because there was a market going on, which wasn't anything to do with Liberty, the signage, there wasn't enough signage to say, here's Liberty, it's contained here, or whatever. I was a bit...
I think Liberty's taken us down a route that I don't want us to go down, and we can talk about it at the end. And there's a question at the back, which is going to be the last question for tonight, because we're over time.
All right, but it is a bit about liberty. And
Or is it not? Well, then, it's
Okay.
not, then I don't want to talk about liberty, because it's not part of our agenda. But you can talk about it over a glass of wine at the end. Is there any last questions, or any last comments from the panel before we wind up? I think it's been a fascinating evening. I'm really glad you came. Thank you very much. I want to thank our speakers. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot. It was great. Before we go, I also want to thank Shape staff for setting the room out, getting the wine out, and making you all feel welcome, I hope. And so that's Ben and Kirsty, who stayed behind. And the other thing I wanted to do was say thank you to Kirsty in particular, because Kirsty is leaving Shape very, very soon. So I just wanted to say a particular thank you to her, because she's moving on, but Shape's a bit like the mafia. And once you've been through Shape, we never let go. So you will be coming back, and you will stay part of the Shape Mafia family. And we expect you to make opportunities for us wherever you go in the future. So thanks again for all you've done for us.
Or you'll wake up with a horse's head in
Okay, there's a chance for a glass of wine, a quick look around the exhibition, maybe 10-15 minutes, and then we'll call it a night. It's been great to see you all. I hope you have good dialogue. Thank you.
I'll edit this.